The ocean is a world of secrets, but there is one place on Earth where the secrets are deeper, darker, and more mysterious than anywhere else. The Mariana Trench. Stretching nearly 11 kilometers down, deeper than Mount Everest is tall, the trench is a place where sunlight never reaches, where pressure is so crushing it would flatten a submarine like a soda can, and where life, if it exists at all, must be stranger than anything we know. For decades, the Mariana Trench was a blank spot on the map, a place of legend and fear, whispered about by sailors and scientists alike. What could possibly survive in such a hostile alien world? What secrets might be hidden in the blackness waiting to be discovered? It was these questions that drove scientists to risk everything and send their most advanced technology into the abyss. The first time a human being descended into the trench, it was 1960. The bathyscaphe Trieste, piloted by Jacques Piccard and Don Walsh, creaked and groaned as it sank into the darkness, finally touching down at the Challenger Deep, the trench's deepest point. They saw little, just a flat, featureless plain, a few strange fish, and clouds of silt. But the seed was planted. If life could exist here, what else might be lurking in the shadows? Decades passed. Technology advanced. The world above changed, but the trench remained silent and unknowable. Then, in the 21st century, a new generation of explorers returned, armed with robotic submersibles, high-definition cameras, and the determination to answer the questions that had haunted oceanographers for generations. What they found would challenge everything we thought we knew about life, about the planet, and about the limits of human understanding. The first thing that struck the scientists was the silence, not the absence of sound, but a silence so profound it seemed to press against the hulls of their submersibles, a silence broken only by the occasional ping of sonar or the distant, echoing groan of shifting tectonic plates. The darkness was absolute. Even the most powerful lights could only pierce a few meters ahead, revealing a world that seemed to stretch on forever, empty and endless. But then as the cameras adjusted, as the eyes of science grew accustomed to the gloom, shapes began to emerge. At first they were simple, tiny shrimp-like creatures, translucent and ghostly, drifting in the water like lost souls. Then stranger things appeared. A fish with a mouth like a trap, lined with needle-sharp teeth, a jellyfish that glowed with an unearthly blue light, pulsing in the darkness like a heartbeat, worms that lived in tubes, feeding on chemicals that seeped from the rocks. Each new discovery was a shock, a reminder that life in all its forms is more adaptable, more resilient, and more bizarre than we ever imagined. But the real shock came when scientists began to analyze the samples they brought back. The creatures of the trench were not just surviving, they were thriving in ways that defied explanation. Their cells were packed with special proteins that protected them from the crushing pressure. Their bodies were laced with chemicals that neutralized toxins and allowed them to feed on things that would kill any other animal. Some of them had no eyes at all, navigating by touch and by the faintest vibrations in the water. Others had eyes so sensitive they could detect the faintest glimmer of bioluminescence, the only light that ever reached these depths. And then there were the things that didn't fit any known category. Microbes that could eat metal, turning the hulls of sunken ships into feasts. Bacteria that could survive in boiling hot vents where the water was laced with sulfur and heavy metals. Even viruses, ancient and strange, that seemed to have no purpose except to infect and mutate, changing the very fabric of life in the trench. The more scientists looked, the more they realized that the Mariana Trench was not just a graveyard, not just a place where things went to die. It was a cradle of life, a laboratory where evolution had run wild, unchecked by the rules that governed the surface world. Here in the crushing dark, life had found a way to survive, to adapt, to thrive in conditions that would kill anything else. But the discoveries didn't stop there. As the submersibles probed deeper, as the cameras captured more and more of the trench's secrets, something even stranger began to emerge. Patterns in the rocks that looked like writing, or perhaps the marks of some ancient unknown creature, structures that seemed too regular, too precise to be the work of nature alone. Could it be that the trench held not just the secrets of life, but the secrets of something else, something older, something lost to time? The scientists were cautious. They knew the dangers of jumping to conclusions, of seeing patterns where none existed, but the evidence was there in the samples, in the footage, in the strange, inexplicable things that kept turning up in the data. The Mariana Trench, it seemed, was not just a place of darkness and death. It was a place of mystery, of wonder, of possibility. And as the world watched, as the images and stories filtered up from the depths, a new question began to take shape. If life could exist here, in the most extreme environment on Earth, what else might be possible? What other secrets might be waiting, not just in the trench, but in the universe beyond? The journey had only just begun. The world above the waves could only watch in awe as the first images from the trench began to circulate. News outlets ran headlines that seemed almost unbelievable. Alien life on Earth? Creatures from the abyss. The last frontier reveals its secrets. But for the scientists who had spent years preparing for these missions, the reality was even more thrilling and more unsettling than the headlines suggested. The Mariana Trench was not just a place of scientific curiosity. It was a place that challenged the very boundaries of what we thought was possible. As the research teams pored over the footage, they noticed something that sent a chill through even the most seasoned explorers. In the deepest parts of the trench, where the pressure was greatest and the darkness most complete, there were flashes of movement, shapes that darted just out of the light, too fast and too strange to be any known animal. The cameras would catch a glimpse, a fin, a tentacle, a glimmer of bioluminescent light, and then it would be gone, leaving only questions in its wake. What were these creatures? How had they evolved to survive in such an unforgiving world? And perhaps most unsettling of all, what else might be hiding in the darkness just beyond the reach of human eyes? The scientists knew they needed more data. They sent down new probes, equipped with better cameras, more sensitive sensors, and robotic arms capable of collecting samples from the most inaccessible crevices. Each mission brought back new surprises. There were amphipods, tiny shrimp-like creatures whose bodies were laced with rare earth metals, making them tougher than steel. There were worms that glowed with a cold green light, their bodies twisting and undulating in the current. There were even rumors, whispered among the crew, of something larger, something that left behind strange tracks in the silt, as if a giant had passed by in the night. But it wasn't just the animals that fascinated the scientists. The trench itself seemed alive, shifting and groaning as tectonic plates collided far below the surface. Earthquakes would send shockwaves through the water, stirring up clouds of sediment and revealing new features on the ocean floor. Hydrothermal vents spewed superheated water, rich with minerals and chemicals, creating oases of life in an otherwise barren landscape. Around these vents, entire ecosystems thrived: tube worms, clams, crabs, and bacteria, all living in perfect balance, sustained by the energy of the earth itself. It was here, in these vent communities, that scientists made some of their most astonishing discoveries. They found bacteria that could convert toxic chemicals into food, using a process called chemosynthesis. These microbes formed the base of a food chain unlike any other on Earth, supporting creatures that had never seen sunlight, never breathed oxygen, never known the world above. Some of these bacteria were so unique, so different from anything else in the tree of life, that they forced scientists to reconsider the very definition of what it means to be alive. And then there were the viruses. In the samples brought back from the trench, researchers found viruses unlike any ever seen before. Viruses with strange shapes, bizarre genetic codes, and abilities that defied explanation. Some could infect bacteria, turning them into factories for new viruses. Others seemed to have no host at all, drifting through the water like ghosts. The implications were staggering. If life could exist here in forms so alien and so resilient, what might be possible elsewhere in the universe? Could the trench be a model for life on other planets, other moons, other worlds? The questions multiplied, each one more tantalizing than the last. But for every answer, there were new mysteries. In one sample, scientists found a fragment of what appeared to be a shell, smooth, iridescent, and impossibly strong. It didn't match any known species, living or extinct. In another, they discovered a mineral deposit that seemed to pulse with a faint internal light, as if it were alive. And in the footage from the deepest dives, there were glimpses, just glimpses, of structures that looked almost artificial. Straight lines, right angles, patterns that nature rarely creates on its own. The debate raged in the scientific community. Some argued that these were just tricks of the light, the result of low-resolution cameras and the human brain's tendency to see patterns where none exist. Others insisted that the evidence was too compelling to ignore. Could it be that the trench was not just a natural wonder, but the site of something more? A lost civilization, a message from the past, or even a sign of life from beyond our world? As the world watched, the story of the Mariana Trench became a global phenomenon. Documentaries were made, books were written, and the public imagination was captured by the idea that the last unexplored place on Earth might hold the key to our greatest mysteries. But for the scientists, the work was just beginning. Each new discovery brought new challenges, new questions, and new dangers. The trench was a place of wonder, but it was also a place of risk, a place where the rules of the surface world no longer applied. And so the exploration continued. New missions were planned, new technologies developed, and the eyes of the world remained fixed on the darkness below. What would they find next? What secrets still waited hidden in the blackness, waiting to be revealed? The only certainty was that the journey was far from over, and that the Mariana Trench still had many more surprises in store. The next phase of exploration brought a new level of intensity. The world's most advanced submersibles, some piloted by humans, others by artificial intelligence, were deployed to probe the trench's most inaccessible regions. These machines were marvels of engineering, built to withstand pressures that would crush a nuclear submarine. Equipped with robotic arms, high-definition cameras, and sensors capable of detecting even the faintest traces of life. Each dive was a gamble, a test of both technology and human courage, as the teams ventured deeper into the unknown. The first descent of the new era was led by Dr. Lina Morales, a marine biologist whose fascination with the deep sea had begun in childhood. As her submersible slipped beneath the waves, she felt a mixture of excitement and fear. The descent was slow, almost meditative, as the light faded and the water grew colder, denser, more alien. At 1,000 meters, the last rays of sunlight vanished, replaced by a darkness so complete it seemed to swallow sound itself. The only illumination came from the sub's lights, which revealed a world of drifting snow, tiny particles of organic matter, the remains of life from above, slowly sinking to the depths. At 4,000 meters, the landscape changed. The seafloor was no longer flat, but broken and jagged, scarred by ancient earthquakes and landslides. Here the submersible's cameras picked up the first signs of life. A translucent octopus, its arms trailing like ribbons. A fish with a head like a lantern, its body glowing with bioluminescent light. A cluster of brittle stars, their arms entwined in a slow, hypnotic dance. Each creature was a marvel, perfectly adapted to a world of darkness and pressure. But it was at 8,000 meters that the real surprises began. The submersible's sensors detected a faint heat signature, something unexpected in the cold, dead world of the trench. As Dr. Morales guided the sub closer, the cameras revealed a hydrothermal vent, a crack in the Earth's crust where superheated water gushed into the ocean. Around the vent, life flourished, tube worms as tall as a man, their bodies blood-red and pulsing, crabs with shells like armor, scuttling over the rocks, mats of bacteria, glowing with a faint, eerie light. The ecosystem was unlike anything on the surface, a world powered not by sunlight, but by the energy of the Earth itself. Dr. Morales collected samples, her robotic arms reaching out to snip a piece of tube worm, to scoop up a handful of bacteria, to capture a crab in a special container. Each sample was a treasure, a window into a world that had existed, unchanged, for millions of years. But as she worked, she noticed something odd. A pattern in the rocks near the vent. A series of grooves and ridges that seemed too regular, too precise to be the work of chance. She recorded the images, her mind racing with possibilities. Was it a natural formation? The result of some unknown geological process? Or was it something else, evidence of life or even intelligence in the most unlikely of places? The return to the surface was tense. The samples were carefully preserved, the footage reviewed again and again. The grooves in the rock became the subject of intense debate. Some scientists argued that they were the result of mineral deposits, shaped by the flow of water over thousands of years. Others saw something more, a pattern, a message, a sign that the trench held secrets even deeper than anyone had imagined. As the debate raged, the samples revealed their own mysteries. The tube worms contained proteins never before seen, molecules that could withstand heat and pressure far beyond anything known in biology. The bacteria were even stranger, capable of metabolizing chemicals that were toxic to all other life. The crab's shell was laced with rare metals, giving it a strength and resilience that defied explanation. Each discovery was a shock, a reminder that the rules of life on the surface did not apply in the trench. But the most shocking discovery came from the bacteria. When scientists sequenced their DNA, they found genes that did not match anything in the known tree of life. Some of the genes seemed to come from viruses, others from archaea, still others from sources unknown. The bacteria were chimeras, hybrids of different forms of life. Their genomes a patchwork of ancient and modern, familiar and alien. The implications were staggering. Had life in the trench evolved separately from the rest of the planet? Or had it been shaped by forces we could not yet understand? The questions multiplied, each more tantalizing than the last. And as the world watched, the Mariana Trench became a symbol of the unknown, a place where the boundaries of science, imagination, and wonder blurred. The journey was far from over. In fact, it had only just begun. The discoveries from Dr. Morales' expedition sent shockwaves through the scientific community. Suddenly, the Mariana Trench was not just a remote curiosity. It was the epicenter of a new era in biology, geology, and even the search for extraterrestrial life. Research teams from around the world scrambled to secure funding and access to the trench, each hoping to be the first to uncover its next secret. The world's media followed every development, and the public's imagination was gripped by the idea that the last unexplored place on Earth might hold the answers to questions as old as humanity itself. As new expeditions launched, the technology improved. Submersibles became more agile, their cameras sharper, their sensors more sensitive. Artificial intelligence was now used to analyze the vast amounts of data collected on each dive, spotting patterns and anomalies that human eyes might miss. The trench, once a place of darkness and silence, was now alive with the hum of human curiosity. One of the most ambitious missions was led by Dr. Kenji Sato, a geochemist from Japan. His team was interested not just in the life forms of the trench, but in the rocks themselves. The Mariana Trench is a place where the Earth's crust is being pulled down into the mantle, a process known as subduction. This process creates extreme conditions, heat, pressure, chemical reactions that are found nowhere else on the planet. Dr. Sato believed that by studying the rocks of the trench, he could unlock secrets about the Earth's past, and perhaps even its future. The submersible descended into the trench, its robotic arms reaching out to collect samples from the walls and floor. The rocks were unlike any found on the surface, dense, dark, and shot through with veins of strange minerals. Some of the samples seemed to pulse with a faint internal glow as if they were alive. When Dr. Sato's team analyzed the rocks back on the surface, they found something astonishing. Tiny pockets of water, trapped inside the minerals for millions of years. This ancient water was unlike any found in the oceans above, rich in chemicals, with a composition that suggested it had been isolated since the earliest days of the planet. But the real shock came when the team examined the water under a microscope. Inside they found tiny organisms, microbes, smaller than any known on Earth, with cell structures that defied classification. These microbes were alive, moving slowly in the ancient water, their metabolism powered by chemical reactions that had nothing to do with sunlight or oxygen. Some scientists speculated that these organisms might be relics of the earliest life on Earth, survivors from a time when the planet was young and hostile. Others wondered if they might be something even stranger, life that had evolved independently, deep within the Earth, cut off from the rest of the biosphere for billions of years. The implications were staggering. If life could exist here in the most extreme conditions imaginable, then it could exist almost anywhere. The search for life on other planets, on Mars, on the icy moons of Jupiter and Saturn, suddenly seemed less far-fetched. The trench had become a model for the kind of environments where life might be found elsewhere in the universe. But the discoveries did not stop there. As Dr. Sato's team continued to analyze their samples, they found evidence of complex organic molecules, precursors to life, forming spontaneously in the rocks. These molecules were the building blocks of proteins, DNA, and other essential components of living cells. The process was driven not by sunlight, but by the heat and pressure of the trench itself. It was as if the Earth, in its deepest, darkest places, was still capable of creating life from scratch. The news electrified the scientific community. Suddenly, the Mariana Trench was not just a place to study life, it was a place to study the origins of life itself. The world's leading experts in chemistry, biology, and planetary science converged on the trench, each hoping to unlock its secrets. The race was on, and the stakes had never been higher. But as the expeditions continued, the mysteries only deepened. In one dive, a submersible captured footage of a strange, gelatinous creature, its body pulsing with light, its movements slow and deliberate. The creature seemed to be watching the sub, its eyes, if they were eyes, reflecting the glow of the cameras. The footage went viral, sparking wild speculation about what else might be lurking in the darkness. And then, in the deepest part of the trench, the Challenger Deep, a robotic probe detected something that defied explanation. A series of regular, repeating signals too structured to be random noise. The signals were faint, almost lost in the background hum of the ocean, but they were there, pulsing, rhythmic, persistent. Scientists debated their origin. Some believed they were the result of geological processes, the movement of rocks and water deep beneath the surface. Others wondered if they might be something more, a message, a sign, a clue to a mystery even deeper than the trench itself. The mysterious signals from Challenger Deep became the obsession of scientists and dreamers alike. Oceanographers, physicists, and cryptographers pored over the data, searching for patterns, meaning, or even a code. The signals were unlike anything previously recorded in the ocean. They were not the clicks and whistles of whales, nor the groans of shifting tectonic plates. Instead, they were precise, almost musical, rising and falling in a sequence that repeated every few hours, as if following some hidden rhythm of the deep. The world's media seized on the story. Headlines speculated wildly. Is the Mariana Trench sending us a message? Alien signals from the deep? The ocean's greatest mystery. For the public, the idea that something unknown, perhaps even intelligent, could be communicating from the bottom of the sea was irresistible. Social media buzzed with theories from the plausible to the fantastical. Some claimed the signals were proof of a lost civilization, others that they were evidence of extraterrestrial visitors. A few even suggested that the trench was a gateway to another world, a portal hidden beneath the waves. For the scientists on the front lines, the reality was both more mundane and more profound. The signals were real and they demanded explanation. Dr. Morales, now leading an international team, coordinated a series of dives to pinpoint the source. The submersibles descended again and again, braving the crushing pressure and utter darkness. their sensors tuned to the faintest whisper of the signal. Each dive brought them closer, narrowing the search to a narrow fissure in the trench floor. A place so deep and so remote that no human had ever seen it before. The fissure was a place of eerie beauty. The walls were lined with strange mineral formations, some glowing faintly in the sub's lights. The water was thick with life, tiny translucent creatures drifting in the current, their bodies pulsing with bioluminescence. As the submersible approached the source of the signal, the team's excitement grew. The instruments registered a spike in the signal's strength, and the cameras captured something extraordinary, a cluster of structures, rising from the trench floor like the ruins of a forgotten city. The structures were unlike anything seen before. They were not the jagged, chaotic shapes of natural rock, but smooth, regular, and symmetrical. Some were tall and slender, others squat and massive, all arranged in a pattern that seemed deliberate. The sub's robotic arm reached out, brushing against one of the structures. The surface was smooth, almost polished, and covered in a thin layer of sediment. When the arm scraped away the sediment, it revealed a material unlike any known on Earth, harder than steel, yet strangely warm to the touch. The team was stunned. Had they discovered the remnants of a lost civilization, buried for millennia beneath the waves? Or was this something even stranger, a natural formation shaped by forces unknown? Or perhaps the work of life forms unlike any on the surface? The questions multiplied, each more tantalizing than the last. Samples were collected and the submersible returned to the surface. In the lab, the analysis began. The material was a mystery, an alloy of metals found in the trench but combined in a way that defied natural processes. The structures themselves were even more puzzling. Some contained tiny chambers filled with crystals that seemed to resonate with the same frequency as the mysterious signals. Others were hollow, their interiors lined with a substance that absorbed light, making them appear as bottomless voids. The implications were staggering. If these structures were artificial, who or what had built them? And why? Theories abounded. Some scientists speculated that they were the work of an ancient civilization, lost to time and memory. Others suggested that they might be the product of a form of life so different from our own that we could barely recognize it as such. A few even wondered if the structures were not the work of life at all, but the result of some unknown geological process, a natural wonder shaped by the unique conditions of the trench. As the debate raged, the signals continued. They pulsed through the water, rising and falling in their strange hypnotic rhythm. Some researchers claimed to detect changes in the pattern, as if the signals were responding to the presence of the submersibles. Others dismissed this as wishful thinking, the result of human imagination projecting meaning onto the unknown. But for Dr. Morales and her team, the sense of wonder only grew. The trench had revealed another of its secrets, but the mystery was deeper than ever. The world watched, breathless, as the story unfolded. What would the next dive reveal? What other secrets lay hidden in the darkness, waiting to be discovered? The world's attention was now fixed on the Mariana Trench like never before. Governments, private foundations, and even tech billionaires rushed to fund new expeditions, eager to be part of the greatest scientific mystery of the century. The international team, now a coalition of the world's top oceanographers, geologists, biologists, and engineers, set up a floating research station above the trench. It became a hive of activity, a place where languages and cultures mixed, united by a single purpose: to unlock the secrets of the deep. The next series of dives were the most ambitious yet. The submersibles were upgraded with new technology: sonar arrays that could map the trench in 3 dimensions, chemical sensors that could detect the faintest traces of organic compounds, and robotic arms with the dexterity of a human hand. Artificial intelligence was now at the heart of every mission, analyzing data in real time, guiding the submersibles through the labyrinthine fissures and canyons of the trench. The first dive of the new campaign, targeted the cluster of mysterious structures. As the submersible descended, the team watched the live feed in tense silence. The structures loomed out of the darkness, their shapes even more striking in high definition. The sub's lights revealed details missed before, intricate patterns etched into the surfaces, some resembling mathematical symbols, others like the spirals and fractals found in nature. The patterns seemed to glow faintly, as if reacting to the light. The sub's robotic arm reached out, delicately removing a fragment from one of the structures. The fragment was sent to the surface, where it was immediately analyzed. The results were astonishing. The material was an alloy, but with a crystalline structure that had never been seen before. It was incredibly strong, resistant to corrosion, and seemed to conduct electricity in a way that defied known physics. The patterns etched into the surface were not just decorative. They appeared to be functional, perhaps even a form of information storage. Meanwhile, the chemical sensors detected something else. A faint trace of organic molecules, unlike any found in the ocean above. The molecules were complex, with chains of atoms arranged in patterns that suggested a biological origin. The team was electrified. Was it possible that the structures were not just artificial but alive in some way? Or had they been built by a form of life so different from our own that we could barely comprehend it? The submersible continued its exploration, moving deeper into the cluster. In one chamber, the cameras captured a breathtaking sight. A colony of translucent organisms, their bodies pulsing with light, clustered around one of the structures. The organisms seemed to be interacting with the structure, their tendrils probing the surface, their bodies glowing in time with the mysterious signals. The team watched in awe as the organisms moved in perfect synchrony, as if responding to some unseen conductor. Samples were collected and the sub returned to the surface. In the lab, the organisms were found to be unlike any known life form. Their cells contained not just DNA but a second unknown molecule that seemed to store information. The cells were capable of repairing themselves at an astonishing rate, and could survive in conditions that would kill any other organism. The implications were staggering. Had the team discovered a new branch of life, one that had evolved in isolation for millions of years? Or was this something even more extraordinary, a form of life that had originated elsewhere and found a home in the depths of the trench? As the world waited for answers, the signals from the trench continued. They grew stronger, more complex, as if responding to the presence of the submersibles. Some researchers claimed to detect patterns in the signals that matched the patterns etched into the structures. Others argued that the signals were a form of communication, a message waiting to be decoded. The sense of anticipation was electric. The Mariana Trench, once a place of darkness and silence, had become the stage for the greatest scientific drama of the age. The next dive was already being planned, and the world held its breath, waiting for the next revelation from the deep. The anticipation surrounding the next dive was unlike anything the scientific world had ever seen. News networks broadcast live from the research vessel, and millions tuned in to watch the feed from the submersible's cameras as it descended into the abyss. The sense of collective curiosity was palpable, a rare moment when humanity seemed united by wonder, not by fear or conflict. As the submersible slipped beneath the waves, the team's focus sharpened. The mission was clear: to explore the innermost chamber of the structure cluster, the one that seemed to be the epicenter of the mysterious signals. The descent was slow and methodical, the sub's lights cutting through the darkness, revealing the alien landscape below. The structures loomed larger, their surfaces shimmering with patterns that seemed to shift and change as the sub approached. Inside the main chamber, the cameras revealed a sight that left the team speechless. The walls were lined with crystalline formations, each one pulsing with a soft blue light. In the center of the chamber stood a monolithic structure, taller than a house, its surface covered in the same intricate pattern seen before. The signals were strongest here, the instruments registering a steady, rhythmic pulse that seemed to resonate through the water itself. The sub's robotic arm reached out, gently touching the surface of the monolith. Instantly, the patterns on the surface began to glow brighter, and the signals changed, becoming more complex, more structured, as if responding to the contact. The team watched in awe as the monolith seemed to come alive, its surface shifting and flowing like liquid metal. The cameras captured every detail, transmitting the images to the world above. Suddenly, the chamber was filled with movement. The translucent organisms, seen in the previous dive, emerged from the shadows, their bodies glowing in synchrony with the monolith. They moved in a coordinated dance, their tendrils weaving intricate patterns in the water. The signals grew louder, more insistent, filling the chamber with a sound that was felt as much as heard, a deep, resonant hum that seemed to vibrate in the bones. The team realized they were witnessing something unprecedented, a form of communication, not just between the organisms, but between the organisms and the structure itself. The implications were staggering. Was the monolith a machine, a living entity, or something in between? Was it possible that the organisms had built it? Or were they its caretakers, its symbiotic partners in a relationship that defied human understanding? As the sub collected more samples, the team's excitement grew. The crystalline formations on the walls were found to contain traces of rare elements, some never before seen on Earth. The monolith itself emitted a faint electromagnetic field, one that seemed to interact with the sub's instruments in unpredictable ways. The data was overwhelming, a flood of information that would take years to fully analyze. Back on the surface, the world was transfixed. The images from the chamber were broadcast around the globe, sparking a wave of fascination and debate. Scientists, philosophers, and theologians weighed in, each offering their own interpretation of what had been found. Some saw evidence of a new form of life, others of a technology so advanced it was indistinguishable from magic. A few even suggested that the trench was a kind of message in a bottle, a relic left behind by an ancient intelligence, waiting to be discovered. The debate was fierce, but one thing was clear. The Mariana Trench had changed our understanding of the world forever. The boundaries between life and non-life, between nature and technology, between the known and the unknown, had been blurred beyond recognition. The journey into the trench was no longer just a scientific expedition. It was a journey into the heart of mystery itself. As the submersible began its ascent, the team reflected on what they had witnessed. The trench had revealed another of its secrets, but the greatest mysteries remained. What was the true nature of the monolith? What was the meaning of the signals? And what other wonders might still be hidden in the darkness waiting to be found? The ascent from the depths was slow, the submersible rising through layers of darkness, each meter bringing the team closer to the surface and to a world forever changed by what they had seen. On board the research vessel, the atmosphere was electric. Scientists crowded around monitors, replaying the footage from the monolith chamber, analyzing every flicker of light, every shift in the patterns, every nuance in the signals. The data was unlike anything ever collected from the ocean's depths, and the implications were only beginning to be understood. As the samples were transferred to the ship's laboratory, the team worked around the clock. The crystalline fragments from the chamber were subjected to every test imaginable: X-ray diffraction, electron microscopy, spectroscopy. The results were astonishing. The crystals were not just mineral formations. They were structured at the molecular level in ways that suggested intentional design. Some of the patterns matched mathematical constants, while others seemed to encode information, like a language written in the geometry of atoms. The monolith fragment, meanwhile, proved even more enigmatic. When exposed to electromagnetic fields, it emitted faint pulses of energy, echoing the signals detected in the trench. The pulses were regular, repeating in sequences that defied random chance. Dr. Morales and her team began to suspect that the monolith was not just a passive object, but an active device, perhaps a transmitter, a memory bank, or even a form of consciousness encoded in matter. The translucent organisms collected from the chamber were equally baffling. Under the microscope, their cells revealed a complexity that rivaled anything seen in the natural world. The second information-carrying molecule, previously detected, was found to be capable of storing vast amounts of data, far more than DNA. The organisms seemed to communicate with each other using pulses of light and subtle changes in their electromagnetic fields, forming a network of information that spanned the entire colony. As the days passed, the team began to piece together a theory. The structures in the trench, the monolith, the organisms and the signals were all part of a single integrated system, a biosphere and a technosphere intertwined, each dependent on the other. The monolith was the heart of this system, a node in a network that extended through the trench, perhaps even beyond. The organisms were its caretakers, its sensors, its memory. Together, they formed a living machine, a symbiotic intelligence that had evolved in the darkness, shaped by the unique conditions of the deep. The implications were staggering. If such a system could evolve on Earth, what might be possible elsewhere in the universe? Was the trench unique, or were there other places on this planet or beyond where life and technology had merged in ways we could barely imagine? The search for extraterrestrial intelligence, long focused on radio signals from distant stars, now turned its gaze inward, to the unexplored frontiers of our own world. The world's response was immediate and profound. Governments pledged new funding for ocean exploration. Universities launched new programs in deep-sea biology, synthetic life, and bioinformatics. Philosophers debated the meaning of intelligence, consciousness, and the boundaries between life and machine. Artists and writers found inspiration in the images from the trench, creating works that captured the sense of awe and wonder that had gripped the planet. But for the team on the research vessel, the work was far from over. The signals from the trench continued, growing more complex with each passing day. Some patterns began to repeat, as if the system was learning, adapting, responding to the presence of the submersibles. The team realized they were not just observers, but participants in a dialogue that spanned the boundaries of biology, technology, and perhaps even time itself. As the sun set over the Pacific, casting long shadows across the deck, Dr. Morales stood at the rail, gazing out at the endless expanse of ocean. The trench was still out there, silent and inscrutable, its secrets only partially revealed. The journey had changed her as it had changed the world. The Mariana Trench was no longer just a place on a map. It was a mirror, reflecting the infinite possibilities of life, intelligence, and the unknown. The world's fascination with the Mariana Trench reached a fever pitch. Every new update from the research vessel was headline news. The footage of the glowing monolith, the synchronized dance of the translucent organisms, and the cryptic signals pulsing through the deep ocean became the subject of endless analysis and speculation. Documentaries, podcasts, and think pieces flooded the media, each trying to make sense of what humanity had witnessed. For the first time in generations, the greatest mystery on Earth was not in the stars, but in the darkness beneath our own oceans. Back on the research vessel, the team pressed forward, driven by a sense of urgency and wonder. The signals from the trench had changed again, growing more intricate, their patterns more deliberate. Dr. Morales and her colleagues worked with mathematicians and linguists, searching for meaning in the sequences. They mapped the signals against the patterns etched into the monolith and the crystalline structures, looking for a key that might unlock the code. One breakthrough came late at night, when a young data scientist noticed that certain signal patterns matched the Fibonacci sequence, a mathematical pattern found throughout nature, from the spirals of galaxies to the arrangement of leaves on a stem. This discovery sent a ripple of excitement through the team. If the signals were based on universal mathematical principles, perhaps they were meant to be understood, not just by the organisms of the trench, but by any intelligence capable of recognizing the language of nature. The team redoubled their efforts, using advanced algorithms to search for other mathematical constants in the signals. They found echoes of pi, the golden ratio, and even prime numbers, patterns that suggested intentionality, perhaps even a message. The idea was both thrilling and humbling. Was the trench's network trying to communicate? If so, what was it saying? Was it a warning, a greeting, or something else entirely? Meanwhile, the biological research continued to yield astonishing results. The translucent organisms, when placed in proximity to fragments of the monolith, began to emit new patterns of light, as if responding to the material's electromagnetic field. The team observed what appeared to be learning behavior. The organisms adapted their responses over time, forming new patterns that matched changes in the signals from the trench. It was as if the entire system was alive, aware and capable of evolving in real time. The implications for science were profound. The discovery of a biosphere-technosphere hybrid in the trench forced a rethinking of the very definition of life. Was intelligence a property of individual organisms, or could it emerge from the interaction of life and environment, biology and technology? The Mariana Trench had become a living laboratory for questions that had once belonged to science fiction. As the research continued, the team faced new challenges. The deeper they probed into the trench's mysteries, the more they realized how little they truly understood. The signals, once regular and predictable, now showed bursts of complexity that defied analysis. The monolith's electromagnetic field fluctuated in ways that seemed to anticipate the submersible's movements, as if the system was aware of being observed. Some team members reported strange sensations during dives, feelings of being watched, of thoughts not their own, of dreams filled with patterns and lights. The world watched, captivated, and unsettled. The Mariana Trench had become a symbol of the unknown, a reminder that the greatest mysteries were not always out there, but right here, beneath our feet. The discoveries had united humanity in awe, but they had also raised new questions about our place in the universe, about the nature of consciousness, and about the limits of human understanding. As the research vessel prepared for its next dive, Dr. Morales gathered her team. They stood together on the deck, looking out at the endless ocean, each of them changed by what they had seen. The trench had given up some of its secrets, but the greatest mystery remained. What did it all mean? And what would they find next in the darkness below? The next dive was planned with meticulous care. Every detail was scrutinized, every contingency considered. The submersible was outfitted with new instruments, devices designed not just to observe but to interact. The team had developed a way to send simple patterns of light and sound, encoded with mathematical sequences, back into the trench. The hope was to see if the system would respond, to test the hypothesis that the signals were a form of communication, not just a natural phenomenon. As the submersible descended, the world watched in anticipation. The feed was broadcast live and millions tuned in, holding their breath as the craft slipped into the blackness. The descent was smooth, the lights illuminating the familiar landscape of the trench, the structures, the monolith. The signals pulsed steadily, their patterns more complex than ever. At the designated depth, the submersible's instruments began transmitting. First a sequence of prime numbers, then the Fibonacci sequence, then the golden ratio universal patterns, chosen for their mathematical significance. The team waited, watching the monitors, listening to the hum of the signals. At first, nothing happened. The signals from the trench continued as before, steady and unchanging. But then slowly the patterns began to shift. The pulses grew louder, more insistent, their rhythm matching the sequences sent by the submersible. The monolith's surface glowed brighter, the patterns flowing and changing in time with the signals. The translucent organisms emerged, their bodies pulsing with light, moving in synchrony with the new rhythm. The team was stunned. The system was responding not just passively but actively, adapting its signals to match those sent by the submersible. It was as if the trench itself was listening, learning and replying. The implications were staggering. For the first time, humanity was engaged in a dialogue with a form of intelligence utterly unlike its own. The experiment continued. The team sent more complex patterns, fractals, mathematical constants, even snippets of music encoded in light and sound. Each time the system responded, its signals growing more intricate, its patterns more beautiful. The monolith became a living canvas, its surface alive with shifting colors and shapes, a visual symphony that defied description. As the dialogue unfolded, the team began to notice something else. The signals were not just responding, they were teaching. Embedded in the patterns were new sequences, new mathematical relationships, new ways of thinking about the world. The team realized they were being shown concepts that had never been imagined, ideas that transcended the boundaries of human knowledge. The world watched in awe as the first true communication with the trench unfolded. Scientists, artists, and philosophers debated the meaning of the exchange. Was it a message, a lesson, a warning? Or was it simply the natural expression of a system that had evolved to communicate in ways beyond human comprehension? As the dive ended and the submersible began its ascent, the team was left with more questions than answers. The trench had revealed a new dimension of its mystery, a living, learning, teaching intelligence, hidden in the darkness for millions of years. The implications for science, philosophy, and the future of humanity were profound. Back on the surface, Dr. Morales addressed the world. Her words were simple, but they captured the spirit of the moment. We have reached across the greatest divide on our planet, and something has reached back. The Mariana Trench has shown us that we are not alone, not just in the universe, but on our own world. The journey is only beginning. The days that followed the historic dive were a blur of excitement, debate, and reflection. The world's media replayed the footage of the glowing monolith and the synchronized dance of the trench organisms on an endless loop. Scientists from every discipline pored over the data, searching for meaning in the patterns, the signals, and the responses. The Mariana Trench, once a symbol of the unknown, had become a beacon of possibility, a place where the boundaries between life and technology, nature and intelligence had been redrawn. In the research vessel's lab, Dr. Morales and her team worked tirelessly, decoding the new sequences embedded in the trench's replies. The patterns were more than just mathematical curiosities. They hinted at new ways of understanding the universe. Some described relationships between energy and matter that had never been theorized. Others suggested principles of organization and adaptation that could revolutionize biology, computing, and even philosophy. The team realized they were not just learning about the trench. They were being invited to see the world through a new lens, one shaped by millions of years of evolution in the most extreme environment on Earth. The implications rippled outward. Universities launched new programs in deep-sea studies, artificial intelligence, and bio-inspired engineering. Artists and musicians found inspiration in the patterns and rhythms of the trench, creating works that captured the sense of awe and wonder that had swept the globe. Philosophers debated the meaning of intelligence, consciousness, and the possibility of communication with forms of life utterly unlike our own. The world was united, if only for a moment, by the realization that the unknown was not something to be feared, but embraced. But for Dr. Morales, the experience was deeply personal. She found herself returning again and again to the footage of the monolith, the glowing organisms, the shifting patterns of light and sound. She remembered the feeling of connection, the sense that the trench was not just a place but a presence, a living system, aware and responsive, reaching out across the darkness. She wondered what it meant for humanity to have made contact, however fleeting, with such an intelligence. Was it a beginning, an invitation, or simply a reminder of how much there was still to learn? The research continued. New expeditions were planned, new technologies developed, and the world's attention remained fixed on the trench. The signals persisted, sometimes fading, sometimes growing stronger, always evolving. The dialogue was ongoing, a conversation that spanned not just the boundaries of language and biology, but the very limits of human imagination. In time, the discoveries from the Mariana Trench began to reshape the world above. The principles learned from the trench's biosphere-technosphere hybrid inspired new approaches to sustainability, medicine, and information technology. The idea that intelligence could emerge from the interaction of life and environment, that consciousness could be distributed across a network rather than confined to a single brain, opened new frontiers in science and philosophy. The trench had become a symbol of hope, a reminder that the greatest mysteries were not behind us but ahead. And yet, for all the progress, the sense of mystery remained. The trench had given up some of its secrets, but its greatest wonders were still hidden in the darkness. The monolith, the organisms, the signals, all were part of a system that defied easy explanation, a living testament to the power of evolution, adaptation, and the unknown. The world had changed, but the journey was far from over. On a quiet evening, as the sun set over the endless Pacific, Dr. Morales stood on the deck of the research vessel, looking out at the horizon. The ocean was calm, its surface reflecting the colors of the sky. Somewhere below in the darkness, the trench waited, silent, inscrutable, alive with possibility. She felt a sense of gratitude, not just for the discoveries, but for the questions that remained. The Mariana Trench had shown her and the world that the unknown was not an abyss to be feared, but a frontier to be explored. As night fell and the stars appeared, Dr. Morales made a promise to herself, to her team, and to the generations that would follow. The journey into the depths would continue. The search for understanding, for connection, for meaning would go on. The trench had spoken and humanity had listened. Now it was up to us to answer. And so the story of the Mariana Trench became the story of us all, a story of curiosity, courage, and the unending quest to know what lies beyond the next horizon. The greatest discoveries, it seemed, were not the answers, but the questions themselves. And in the darkness of the deep, the light of wonder would never fade.